Hello, I'm Dr. Mewborn, and this is History of the Baptist. We are in Lesson 23, and today the topic is Baptist and Religious Liberty. This is a wonderful topic to talk about how the Baptists have influenced religious liberty in America. So let's go ahead and get started in our study today. As we look at this topic, I want to begin by saying these words. As early as 1612, an English Baptist confession declared that the magistrate is not by virtue of his office to meddle with religion or matters of conscience, to force or compel men to this or that form of religion or doctrine, but to leave Christian religion free to every man's conscience and to handle only civil transgressions. So from very early on, in the English Baptist world, the idea was religious liberty. It was this idea of a separation of church and state, or what we see called the wall or a wall of separation. And so they're somewhat connected, but in a very loose way. In other words, the church can influence the state, but the state should not be running the church and vice versa. And there's kind of a breaking off, but they can influence, but they cannot control one another. The work of Roger Williams and John Clarke in the 1600s helped pave the way for religious liberty in America, which is really neat when we start to think about the mindsets of these guys who saw the bigger picture or saw down the road what was coming and what should be coming to America. The Act of Toleration 1689, we've talked about that a lot in previous lessons, was greatly encouraged and debated among the political leaders in America. So what was taking place is the very things that were happening in England, it was crossing over. People were knowing about these things over in the colonies. And so this talk was not just something that they said, it's neat what's going on over in England, but they were saying this would be a great model for us to look at moving forward. And they were trying to learn from the past, trying to learn from mistakes or things that they had seen, and that's what a lot of what was happening at the time. And so this is just a great picture of trying to see the differences of pouring into different people types and the religious freedom in that and ministering in different ways, as we've shown this slide before. But as we continue on talking about Baptist and religious liberty, according to American history, no Baptists were ever executed for religious reasons. Instead, many Baptists were persecuted by whippings, paying taxes, seizing of property, paying fines, and lingering imprisonments. So there was religious oppression, there was persecution. It didn't lead to death that we know of in America for these very reasons. But we do see a lot of different types of punishment. Public ridicule and shaming was commonplace to many Baptists during the 1600s and 1700s in America. We see this with the whipping of Obadiah Holmes, and we've talked about him in the previous lessons as well. As we continue on, Roger Williams was coined for the phrase, the wall of separation. And so what we know is with Roger Williams starting the First Baptist Church in America, and he was only Baptist for a short period of time, what we see maybe about 4 months, 5 months, but he coined this term. But then Thomas Jefferson popularized the statement with the separation between church and state. He said this: erecting the wall of separation between church and state is absolutely essential in a free society. And in other words, for the society to truly function freely, where people can believe what they want as long as they don't hurt other people or cause harm to other people in any other way. They can believe what they want to. They can practice what they want to under that belief system, as long as they just don't cause problems or break the laws in any other ways. And so he's saying this is so essential to how a free society actually functions. You should be able to believe how you want to without the state interjecting their thoughts and intercepting any kind of beliefs that's going on, and kind of vice versa with the church doing things for the state as well. So that's just a neat topic. The two greatest movements that impacted religious liberty in America is, number one, the Great Awakening. The preaching of the Great Awakening prompted people to act upon their beliefs. Their volunteerism and conservative stance supported the push for religious liberty. So the Great Awakening had a tremendous effect on how people thought, how people acted, and they wanted to see this belief, this idea of belief going further and being able to practice what you believe, because people were being converted left and right, and they didn't want anybody to oppress them based on the experiences that they had. Then as we move forward, we also see the second thing that was a big part of religious liberty in America was the Enlightenment. The politics of the Enlightenment empowered individuals to think and act for themselves, almost like the idea of giving power back to the people. The concept of a democracy was embraced by citizens hoping to make a difference in their societies. And so now people were taking these opportunities. They were taking these ideals, this Enlightenment period, these ideals that they could make a difference in and of themselves as individuals, and they were running with that. And they were embracing it and doing whatever they felt led to do. Here's kind of a picture of what was going on with the Great Awakening here, and some outdoor preaching that's taking place there. And just people are feeling empowered. People are feeling free, and they don't want anybody to take away that freedom. They don't want anybody to oppress them, because they have been almost, in many ways, somebody has awoken them, or has just, I guess you would say, woken their spirits. So it's a very unique thing when you think about the preaching during the Great Awakening, and of course the Enlightenment as well. As a result, religious persecution became culturally unacceptable to most people in America. We're talking about New England here, and what was happening is that the religious persecution that people were seeing that was happening in New England, Middle Colonies, Southern Colonies, people got tired of it, and they were saying, this just can't be right. And the Great Awakening, as well as the Enlightenment, was trying to push them out of that mindset. Isaac Backus of Massachusetts and John Leland of Virginia helped articulate the importance of religious liberty and the positive impact it has on society. And so I've seen this picture time and time again, and it's this idea of a man standing at the top of a hill. He's reached the top. He's reached what he was going for, and now what is he doing? He's pulling people up. That's what Isaac Backus and John Leland were doing. They were taking people to where they were already spiritually and mentally, and they were taking them there. It's kind of a cool idea. Continuing on, talking about New England, we see Isaac Backus, 1724 to 1806. Here's a picture of him here on the right. Leading Baptist preacher during the American Revolution, campaigned against state-established and state-regulated churches, chairman of the Grievance Committee of the Warren Association. In his life, Backus set the tone for New England Baptists regarding theology, evangelism, and churchmanship. So much was done by Isaac Backus to help pave the way for religious liberty in America. Backus is known for his sermons and writings. One of the sermons in 1773, an appeal to the public for religious liberty against the oppressions of the present day. Backus in that sermon stated, "Now who can hear Christ declare that his kingdom is not of this world, and yet believe that this blending of church and state together can be pleasing to him?" He's just strong stance for religious liberty throughout his messages and his writings. In 1778, he authored a historically important work entitled Government and Liberty, Described and Ecclesiastical Tyranny Exposed. And so he's talking about this. I found this unique gravestone here that talks about Isaac Backus, which I just found amazing. It talks about him being a pioneer champion of religious liberty, and the earliest Baptist historian in America. And so we see some thoughts on him that I think are just wonderful, that talks about who he is. And so that's a great tombstone there to kind of look at for him. Going to the Middle Colonies, this was a great place to live for many people of faith, because there was a lot of toleration, a lot of openness, pluralism, whatever. But faith groups received great freedom in Pennsylvania, Middle Colonies area. Baptists were able to develop their strength and theology without much persecution there. Quaker influence and religious pluralism helped develop and support religious liberty throughout America, and here's how. The Middle Colonies provided an example for Baptists to follow, number one, and then number two, the Middle Colonies provided a safe place for persecuted Baptists to find refuge. So there's two main reasons why the Middle Colonies were so unique. And it was, number one, they set the example. Number two, they were a refuge for people to go that were being oppressed. And they helped develop what was going on in the Middle Colonies. Actually began to become not only noticed, but it was something that was being almost admired by many in the other colonies, because they were looking at that freedom and saying, that's really good. That's actually really nice what's happening there. We talk about the city of brotherly love with Philadelphia. It's this idea we love, we care, we want to embrace people and not just fight people. And so that was really good. I found this quote I thought was neat. To change bad habits, we must study the habits of successful role models. And that's what a lot of people thought of the Middle Colonies. They were a successful role model. And so if we're going to be good at what we do, we got to look at them. And that's what the other colonies were actually doing in some ways. We get to the southern colonies. The southern colonies greatly benefited from the vast work regarding religious liberty in the other colonies. The Anglican Church passed laws, which the Anglican Church, the Episcopal Church in the southern colonies, passed laws in the southern colonies that dissenters would be persecuted. So some areas were much stricter than others. So they passed these laws, but they weren't always enforced. And when you don't enforce certain laws, people will go forth and do what they want to do. And this allowed for Baptists, the Baptist beliefs, and Baptists in general to flourish even in the southern colonies. Baptists and Presbyterians led the charge for religious freedom in the South. Baptists faced problems including registering for meeting places, recognizing Baptist performed marriages, and paying tithes to support Anglican ministers. So there were consequences if you did become a Baptist or marry a Baptist. There were some consequences that could really affect where you met as a church, who was recognized or how you were recognized in a certain place, certain colony, and then paying tithes. Your money was going to state teachers, preachers, and so that became a very big issue for a lot of the Baptists in the South, but they were starting to overwhelm that. I kind of just have a picture there of the oppression that can happen, religious oppression. And people, their mouths are being shut because they can't talk or they can't do things because it's affecting so many people. John Leland, let's talk about him for just a moment. 1754 to 1841, there he is on our right. American Baptist minister who preached in Massachusetts and Virginia. Strong abolitionist, organized Baptists, and articulated their views about religious liberty. Leland supported James Madison due to Madison's support for religious liberty in what became the First Amendment to the Constitution. And Madison was seated in the first Congress that same year. And that's just amazing when you think about that. There's a book about him on the right, Baptist Heroes of the Faith, Volume 4. And so it talks about really the First Amendment and why does that matter? What was such a big deal about that, and how did John Leland play a huge role in that with James Madison, our fourth president? Leland's treatise on religious liberty was the rights of conscience, inalienable, and therefore religious opinions not cognizable by law or the high-flying churchman stripped of his legal robe appears a Yahoo. So it's amazing when you read some of these titles how long they are, but they're trying to get everything they want out in that title so you can kind of see what the thesis is. The main points of the book are the rights of the conscience are inalienable Number two, the establishment of religion by law always damages religion. And number three, the real motives of the establishment are not to benefit religion. So these are strong points that he's making, that the establishment is trying to destroy any form of religious liberty. And that's what's being discussed, and that's what John Leland is really dealing with. As we continue on, James Madison, 1751 to 1836, here he is on our right. American statesman and founding father, served as fourth president of the United States, called the father of the Constitution because he drafted a long-standing document, or the long-standing document. Madison believed that John Leland and the Baptists were major players in the fight for religious liberty, and he makes several comments about this throughout his writings and some of the things that he's quoted on. And so he's making that stance and taking that stand that the Baptists have done so much for religious liberty. We have to recognize that. And so this was one of our presidents that actually said that. So a very strong case for that. Anyways, that is the end of lesson 23 today. It's so good to be with you, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.